This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is James Arnold Taylor, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi. I have a good feeling about this.
Joining us today for a cup of coffee to discuss episode 14 of the first season of The Bad Batch. I always say that as if I know there's going to be another season. I don't know if there is, but I hope there is, because that means I'll get to talk with these two gentlemen. Of course, we were talking about War-Mantle, and we're going to have two special guests. First, of course, Mr. Tom Gross.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Oh, boy, another episode, another week of Bad Batch. War-Mantle, I love the title. And as always, it's great to be here with you, Dan, and I love the guest we were talking to tonight.
Yeah, we've got a really cool guest. He is a former student of mine, and now he is moving on to bigger and brighter things. But we had to get Mr. Carter Grieco on the show. Carter is a member of the CWK Alliance, an overall good dude, and he knows his Star Wars. Carter, welcome to Coffee with Kenobi.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm really looking forward to getting to talk about War-Mantle today.
Yes, absolutely. Carter actually, among his many other things on his resume, he works with a guy you may have heard of. His name's Tyler Pompa, a very dedicated member of the CWK Alliance. And rumor has it, Carter, you guys have been chatting at work about the Bad Batch. So come on, I hope you don't hold anything back. We know you've been practicing.
Well, if there's anything that I'm good at, it's definitely talking. And me and Tyler do that quite frequently. After we get our stuff done.
There you go. Work
Tyler,
first,
yes.
Tyler gives me a good perspective on the Bad Batch. He's big into Rebels, which unfortunately I have not watched. I know at least you, Dan, are really big into that kind of stuff. But I have not watched Rebels, but he has. So when we were talking about the episode where Hera came into it with Chopper, he was very excited about that. He's given me all kinds of new perspectives on the recent episodes. And honestly, it's just nice being able to talk to him, because during the school year, I don't see him as much because I work at night.
For sure.
But he's definitely altered and added to how I have viewed, especially the last couple episodes. He's got some really good talking points.
I'm glad to hear that. Well, yeah, he's definitely a good one to chat with, as are you. And you said I'm into that kind of stuff. You mean Star Wars Rebels, probably the best possible Star Wars thing ever made. Is that what you're talking about?
That is that. Yes.
Okay.
That is what I was referring
Very
to.
good. Well, let's talk about War-Mantle as we always do. We want to give a letter grade and just kind of an overall reactions to the episode. Tom, we'll start with you. Your letter grade and overall reactions to the episode.
Oh, yes. I gave this one an initial reaction of an A, solid A. I started to write the plus on there, but then I stopped and it said A-, so I erased it. So solid A. My initial reaction, let's just say that if this were part of a game of chess, which I know Carter can relate to, I do believe that someone would have called check.
Yeah.
Interesting. I agree with that. Carter, what about you? Your overall reactions and your letter grade?
I gave this an A+. I felt like this was the first episode in a couple episodes. I'm not one to call anything filler. I take nothing for granted from what we get from Disney at this point. But this episode for me was a very solid A+. I felt like it was very fast paced, which I love about these Star Wars shows. I love the story building. I love the world building. But when it's fast paced and we get constant action, and it didn't feel like it was too up and down. It felt like it was very consistent throughout. I think ideally that's what I'm looking for from this new kind of genre of Star Wars shows. And I felt like it hit every single mark that I was expecting.
Here. I like that. I'm gonna follow up with that. I'm also giving this an A+. If this isn't an A+, I don't know what an A+ is.
Exactly.
I mean, it's got drama, it's got suspense, it's got some callbacks to the original trilogy, it's got a nice cliffhanger, it's got some character development, and it brings in McQuarrie stormtroopers. So come on, doesn't get much better than that. Let's go ahead and break right into it. We start out with a different intro for the first time in a while in an unfamiliar place.
Yeah.
There's a chase sequence that I wasn't expecting, where we've got a clone who is on the run. Carter, when you first saw this opening sequence, what were you thinking?
It reminded me, and I'm gonna come back to this point a lot because I'm a big Mandalorian fan. It reminded me a lot of episode 1, season 1 of The Mandalorian. We come in on this strange world. You got these mountains that almost look like they have faces carved into them. Lots of trees. I mean, the animation here was phenomenal. Top tier, what you expect from Disney at this point. And then as we fall down into the foliage, we see a trooper running. And maybe a more diehard fan would have understood that that was Gregor right off the bat, but I did not. I just saw a trooper running and assumed that it was a rebellious trooper.
Mhm.
But overall, I think it was a great scene. It led to that kind of mysticism that I personally am a fan of. I think the fact that he took 2 shots of a stun gun is very interesting. I wonder if that's part of the clone commando kind of setup that he has, because we see a clone commando later in the episode take, I believe it was 4 shots from a stun blaster. I mean, eventually this clone is captured. An interesting thing that I caught were those creatures, and you saw when that trooper reached the edge of the cliff, they let out a very unique noise, and it echoed almost to show how alone this trooper was. And I felt like it did a great job of establishing that this was someone who was in peril, who was being hunted.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, there's a lot of good things that you've brought up there. The stun thing, I'm a little surprised by the stun still, because we've been seeing that with the Bad Batch when they take on the Empire, but it was nice to see stun here. So, they weren't trying to kill this particular person, this particular clone. Right off the bat, I thought it could have been Gregor. I thought it could have been Wolf. Maybe it was going to be a clone that we were not necessarily overtly familiar with from the Clone Wars itself. But we don't have time to really get into it because he's captured, taken away, and then we see the Bad Batch himself. There's a fun little sequence, Tom, at the beginning before we get into actual action with the Bad Batch, where Hunter and Omega are having a moment together. The Hunter's sort of unaware of. Talk about what you sort of noticed from that little quick scene.
It totally flashes back to the early episodes of the Bad Batch, where Omega just sort of is observing Hunter, and whatever he does, she does, and she's kind of goofing around with Gonk like she often is, and she's got that little wrench, and she looks over, and Hunter is flipping the knife. And she looks at him and then looks at the wrench, and she does the motion. I can't remember if she actually tosses it or not, but she does the motion, and that's when the notification came off. So that was a great little moment, and like I said, it flashed me back to early, kind of, I don't want to say, can I say more innocent episodes of Bad Batch? We didn't have sort of the baggage that we carry now, where she's sort of broken into her own. Hunter has had moments of, I don't want to call poor fathering, but tough fathering, tough lessons for Hunter. Not that he's being tough on her, but just all of that. And so it's just kind of a nice moment here because, gosh, we just saw that action sequence that was pretty intense, and so we get a light little feel there when Rex's request comes into the Marauder.
It really reminded me of the parent motif very overtly because of the fact that she's mimicking what he's doing. Yeah. It also reminded me of Jaws, of the film Jaws.
Oh, how's that?
There's a wonderful sequence before the 3 of them get on the boat to go after the shark. And the little boy is sitting at the table watching his dad, and whatever his dad does with his hands, the little boy does. It happens 3 separate times, and ultimately it breaks down the fact that above all things, this man is a father, this man is a person, and you need to care about him because there are people that care that there's a relationship there with the son. He's a father, and it was a quick thing, but as much as they ape other classic films, it wouldn't surprise me if that was somewhat of an inspiration. I don't know. Either way, it was really, really nice.
It was.
But then Rex shows up, as you both mentioned. And then I really the message itself is basically, hey, I have a mission for you. I'd love to talk more, but I can't. He's clearly very busy. Clearly something is going on that hopefully we'll find out about. But then all of them react, I think, in absolutely perfect ways that epitomize what they're like as characters. Carter, go ahead and talk about a little bit each of their reactions and sort of what you noticed.
So I liked how Echo, and he continues this sentiment once they are actually touched down to the planet and they discover the forces there. He has the overall sentiment of, this is a trooper. This is a man. This is not some clone who is expendable. This is not a droid who can be left. This is a valuable asset. And I think that if anybody on the Bad Batch would know what it feels like to be given up on, it would be Echo. And Tech, following his very simple, these are the odds. He's almost like a C-3PO that can shoot a blaster in this series.
What a great comparison.
He's going to tell you the odds. He's going to tell you the odds, and he's going to do his job. And that's what he ultimately does. And I won't spoil it. I'll come back to this. But you could say he was correct in being cautious. I mean, they were going in with no real surveillance. Right. I think Omega kind of has, the childlike aspect to her. She kind of fits in with Echo, but for different reasons. I think that Omega wants to save everybody just because that's how she is. I think she maybe was raised by the Kaminoans like an actual child, has been taught empathy. And while I know the Kaminoans, especially if you are familiar with the legends aspect of the Kaminoans and their origins, are not great people, I do believe that some of them likely instilled some level of empathy into her. And I truly think that it was Wrecker who had the most impact on this scene.
Interesting.
Almost as a joke, but I do think it's important to show that how conflicting these ideas are. And I think when you come back to like Hunter as the father, Omega as the kid, and then all these guys are kind of the uncles, it's Wrecker, in this instance, I saw that as like, oh, this team is dysfunctional. They all have different goals. Mm-hmm. And in the end, I think Hunter did the right thing by following Echo and Omega's suggestions, by not leaving anyone behind, but also listening to Tech and doing surveillance, because they don't have any backup, but they can at least do their own surveillance.
Interesting. Yeah, I agree. I like your comments on Wrecker particularly. He's very compliant. It's a wonderful humorous tone because he basically agrees with everybody, and conversely, nobody at the exact same time. And I think it shows that he's open-minded. That he's certainly not naive. He's seen more battle than most people could ever possibly imagine. But he's also very agreeable to the extent that I don't think that he wants to please everybody, Tom, but I do think that he's just constantly finding these different ideas work for him. What do you think? Is there more to it than that?
Well, yeah, I that what you just said is what I was about to say is, one thing, Wrecker's listening.
Yes.
I mean, we could just surface level look at it and say it's put in there for jokes. Wrecker's the simpleton, and he's just being funny. But I think Carter, you're right, and Dan, your comment is, Wrecker tends to try to see the best in people, and so everybody has a good point, and what, in a situation like this, everyone can have a good point. And so it's kind of like no one's right, no one's wrong, and Wrecker's pointing out that everyone's got a good point. What I wanted to say about Omega is how childlike her reasoning was, which in juxtaposition to all the other episodes building up to this, she seems to have gotten, especially in the Hera arc, she really seemed to be kind of becoming more mature and adult. And here, her words were so simple. She said, "He's in trouble. He needs help. We need to go." And I was like, wow, that's something has happened, because here she's back playful with, not playful, but like learning from Hunter by flipping the knife, and then she has this very simple, childlike explanation to why they should help. So I don't know what to make of that at this point. But Wrecker, certainly, I think the point is everybody's got a good point.
And isn't it cool too that he also sees things? Because I agree, he's far from a simpleton. He's definitely not a simpleton at all. He sees that this isn't a black and white situation. There's a lot of gray here. He's open to different points of view and different perspectives, which is actually pretty mature. As is Omega's reaction. I would counter and say that her reaction is not childlike at all. I would say it's very adult. It's very mature and compassionate. It's more about, money. Yes, she basically says rescuing is way more important than money. Like we don't need money. We need to help someone, which is what Echo says too. Echo's been in that situation. He has a rather poignant conversation later in the episode that I think it sounds like you were going to talk about, Carter, where he basically says, look, on Skackle Miners, same thing happened to me.
Yeah.
I trust Rex. Rex needs us. That's it. Hunter is reluctant. Tech is very logical and pragmatic. Wrecker is somewhat compliant. I think the whole thing is a really nice snapshot or a microcosm of all of them and their personalities. If you were to say to me, hey, can you show me a quick scene from the Bad Batch? It's going to basically give me all I need to know about all these characters in like 2 seconds. Well, here it is.
And Mr. Zare, if I may cut in, I feel that the way that Omega specifically went about that reminded me a lot of Anakin and Ahsoka's thinking during the Clone Wars, the 7 series. Well, I guess Ahsoka was there for more like 6. But the way that they would throw caution to the wind, I mean, there are countless scenes. And I think the one that really sticks out, you can talk about Ahsoka in the final episode of season 7, where she says those clones may be willing to die, but I'm not going to be the one that ends their life. I think you can point to Anakin being willing to break off a good chunk of the 501st, including Rex, to go help Ahsoka and help. I'm blanking on the Mandalorian's name. Yeah, to help fight Maul off of Mandalore. I think that Omega is in that same boat where she understands the value of life more than a tactical advantage or a monetary gain. I think she's shown that throughout the show. But I think that what's different now is that she is able to rationalize why she feels that way. And I think that points to what you were saying, Mr. Zare, about her getting more mature throughout the show.
Yes, I agree. Well, hey, very well said. It's very clear, ladies and gentlemen, why we're having Carter on the show. He knows his stuff. And by the way, you have a pass. You can call me Dan now. I know that may be a bit of a hard stretch, but you are allowed to.
It's weird.
I understand. I have teachers that I'm close with still that I still can't call them by I still have to say Mr. and they're in their 60s. So I understand.
It's weird now.
I know this is a good problem to have. Speaking of weird, we go back to Camino, which we haven't seen a ton of recently. And then we learn that the Empire has canceled all the contracts. I suppose it was probably inevitable, Tom.
Yes.
But it's not a quick sequence. We get to see more of them a little bit later. But there's just something in the air that's very unsettling. I particularly like how this is set up. It's always dark and cryptic on Camino, but this feels like a little bit more than that.
Well, the setting, the scene, the opening shot of the the ocean and the platform that they're on, and the ocean is rough, the skies are dark, but even more so, you have 2 looming Star Destroyers now. So just something in that opening shot made you feel sort of creepy and dreadful. And then, of course, we get Rampart and Crosshair. I mean, how much more gloomy can you get? Crosshair just, I don't know about you guys, but anytime I see Crosshair now, I just cringe. He is so frightening and so scary. And as we talked on a previous episode, that low sort of growling, I don't know if it's a guitar or a bass or what it is, that when he's around, it just, I want to pop my back and do something to take that feeling away. But it becomes clear that they are abandoning ship. They are mobilizing the clones off the planet. Yeah. And Rampart says regarding the Kaminoans, they will be dealt with. I think it's just one. Oh,
He's not nice.
he's nasty.
Yeah,
You know,
he
and
is.
he's like, remember, I sort of felt that way about Callus for a while in Rebels.
Right, but this seems
In fact,
even worse,
yeah,
especially
I
because
mean,
he's so well groomed.
right? Yeah, and I mean, and so, and we haven't had the episode where he fights Zeb, and you see some compassion, but
Yep.
but yeah, it's so nasty. And just what I take from this, and I mean, and yeah, this isn't the first time. I mean, this isn't the last time we see Rampart on Camino in this episode. But what it takes from me is it's one more example. And that's what I wanted from this time period. You know, this is what I wanted from a show like Bad Batch that takes place in the formation of the Empire, that takes place before a New Dawn. Because in the New Dawn, what I took from that, as I said many times on Coffee with Kenobi, is just the recklessness, the environmental, the galactic recklessness of the Empire. Here we see it in just, oh, the Kaminoans, they'll be dealt with. And you just know what that means. And you know, even though and Carter, you alluded to from the legends that the Kaminoans may not be the most reputable group, but still, every being deserves respect of some sort, and clearly here in this example, the Empire disregards that. We know how they treat aliens.
And it all falls back to Palpatine, doesn't it? Because the Kaminoans helped him basically eradicate the Jedi, and now he's like, "No, you're dispensable." He doesn't respect life. He doesn't respect life at all, and that's transcendent, or not transcendent, but it's very much translates to Rampart and all of these Imperials. So Echo, we get on the planet itself. Echo says Rex trusts him, and I trust Rex. Boom, boom. So then Hunter gets to track, which I found to be really cool. You just kind of seen him get back to his own roots.
It's been a while.
But then it has been a while, a really long while. But then Omega is going to go with him. She's actually got a pretty reasonable reason for going with them. But Hunter basically says, coming here was up for debate. This isn't. Carter, talk about Hunter's comments to Omega and his decision to have her stay behind. Hasn't she proved herself, or is this a good decision?
So I'm actually really happy that I got this section to talk about, because I wouldn't call it a point of conflict with Omega, but I believe that there is some form of childishness with I would like to save everybody that comes across our path, no matter what they do. And I understand her reasoning, why she feels this way. I'm sure she's seen thousands of men fly off of Camino to never see them again. I'm sure that she views every single one of those lives as meaningful. But I do believe that Hunter has put her in harm's way by allowing her to tag along. And I think you can look as recent as last episode as an example of that. I mean, we saw the Pikes essentially hold her as a hostage until they got their spice back. And the Pikes are not ones to mess around. And I think that really scared Hunter. Hunter saw how serious Sid was when she talked about the Pikes. I mean, he saw the Pikes cut off a man's horn in front of them, like no respect for anyone in the room. So I think that Hunter, he obviously has a pretty good understanding of how the universe works, but he's only worked with men. I think now we're finally getting to the point where he's had enough experience with Omega where he understands that he has to draw the line. Because, I mean, and this ties into the end of the episode, could you have imagined if Omega was the one who suffered the fate that Hunter suffers? Could he imagine if she were to pass away because of this mission? He understands that he couldn't live with that, and that she has to stay behind no matter how much she doesn't like it. And I also agree with the idea to leave Wrecker behind, because I do believe, I don't want to call Wrecker naive, but I do believe that he does not have the same sense of stealth as everyone else does. So I do believe that for this mission, leaving those two behind was proper. It obviously showed to be essential for their escape. And I understand her frustration with it, but I do believe that at some point you have to get past the I want to save everybody all the time, and Hunter's just going to go along with it mentality.
Interesting perspective. I appreciate that. It's I thought that Wrecker went because Wrecker's the toughest. If anybody could protect her the best, it would be Wrecker.
That's probably
and
true.
And he has a valid point where he says, you know what, we're gonna need backup. We're gonna need a quick out. You guys are gonna have to be the ones to do it. So she kind of takes on the hero role to a degree. It's also a little conflicting because earlier when basically we presume that she beat him in Space Chess, right? And Djarik, and he said, "I'm never going to leave you behind again." But this is I don't know. It's a little bit, again, there's gray. It's not black and white. This is gray. She's proven herself time and again. They do need a backup, and he's worried about her. I mean, we know that the Empire and everybody else is after her. So I mean, I think this is probably the right call. We get to the huge military base, and this thing, Tom, is absolutely massive. This is the part, and I know you want to talk about this too, Carter, where Echo has a really honest moment where he shows some vulnerability and explains why this is so important to him. And Tom, I feel like we've kind of lost a little bit of Echo along the way, and he's one of the most interesting characters in the Bad Batch. So talk about that as well as the arrival into the Imperial base and what you thought when you saw that massive hole in the ground.
Oh yeah, you knew something was up because, and again, I'm glad you mentioned the Hunter tracking because that's another flashback to early Bad Batch episodes where he stops and he uses his ability. We haven't seen him use his ability in a while, and he senses and he has this feeling that like something about this mountain. And I want to mention, we've talked about all the peripheries of art and animation, and in this case music, because when he tracks them to that mountain, there is a musical piece there that does a and then it drops low, giving you a sense of depth and like bottomless pit, which is ironic because the mountain goes up, but then when we see from the top, it does go down. And it's in that mountain, and I think that is, I don't know. There's got to be something. A mountain can be magnificent, but especially when there is this huge military base inside of it. Certainly, it has an impact on Echo. The whole mission does. First of all, his connection to Rex, and Rex is the one calling for it. And earlier in the episode, as you mentioned, he says, if Rex thinks it's important, I think it's important. And so, it kind of comes back to the captain. The captain says, but Echo also has that personal appeal that, hey, you were all willing to save me on Skeko Minor. This is no different. When actually in the back of my head, I thought, well, they did have a Jedi with them, but okay, I'm buying because this is important. We don't have Jedi around anymore. And so we have to do that. And so Echo makes this appeal that brings as you mentioned, Carter, it brings the humanity back, that they are not just clones. They are individuals, and we've seen in the Bad Batch how many individuals there are when it comes to clones. I mean, probably the biggest one is the one I forgot all about in this episode, and that is Omega. Of course she would have interest in rescuing, or quote, Reg. She's one. And so I always forget about that aspect, that she is a clone as well. And so she has that appeal, but Echo makes that, because Hunter's ready to bail. Hunter's like, okay, we got to get out. We'll message Rex and say, not possible. And Echo makes a stand. And it's a really, really moving moment because going back to the conversation on the ship that we talked about, where everybody has a good point, but then Echo makes the final appeal. We have to try. And there's something about that appeal that, Hunter can't ignore. And so in they go, they find the lift, they find the way in. And do you mind if I say a couple comments about just the interior?
No, please do. Please do.
I just so they get in there, and I just when they got in there, the first thing I looked at my daughter and I said, "What does this remind you of?" She goes, I don't know. It looks like the inside of an imperial place, like all the other imperial places. And I said, thank you. Thank you for making my point, because that's exactly what I thought. But there's so many going forward. There's so many moments while they're inside this military base that I kept thinking that they just as well be in the Death Star. Because there's so many different. There's the red control room. There's the little sides that they can hide in and shoot from, and so many cool little places like that. And the lift. There's the lift that that we see in the Death Star as well. So anyway, I just want to get that off the table, because I know Hunter. I know. I know. I'm at loss for words now. I know Carter wants to say a few things about Echo as well.
Yeah, go ahead, Carter.
I think that a lot of the stuff with Echo comes back to obviously Skako Minor. I think a lot of it comes back to he was hooked up to those machines. He was used as like a human,
a pawn
droid.
Yeah.
We don't know how long he was used as that, but he was experimented on for multiple seasons of the Clone Wars. And he knows exactly what this clone is going through. This could be a clone that is just a Reg, just one of Rex's friends. They could be risking all this after. But I think it does bring back an important point that they trust Rex. They trust Rex more than anything. He's one of the only clones that have reached out to the Bad Batch about the post-inhibitor chip era, the post-Order 66 era of the Republic, or now the Empire. And I believe that Echo has so much trust in him, because I can't recall the scene exactly, but I do remember Rex was at least around Echo when he awoke on Skako Minor. He may have been in Rex's arms. I can't recall the exact scene, but it wouldn't shock me if Rex was the one face he latched onto as a face of familiarity. And so when Rex says that he needs this Reg, this clone, this soldier rescued, Echo, most of everybody knows how much his words mean, because of how much effort Rex put into saving him and rescuing him from the experiments that he was put under.
I love it. Yeah, well, that's a really good place to stop. Those excellent points, Carter. We're going to go ahead and take a quick break. When we return, we're going to talk about the reveal of a new army for the Empire and quite an exciting escape. Or is it? This is Coffee with Kenobi.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
With travel beginning to open up and Walt Disney World and Disneyland reaching full capacity, this is the time to book your Disney World vacation with MEI and Mouse Fan Travel. Their signature service and expert advice will help clients maximize their vacation, time, and dollar. I use Becky Menken and MEI's incredible services all the time, both for family and for travel for the show, because of their no cost, no obligation quote when you use the service. Plus, they proactively adjust a booking if the rate goes down. Literally, I will wake up one morning and I will get an email from MEI saying that the price went down, and I will get a refund sent to my credit card right away. I don't have to do anything. They help your family enjoy everything Galaxy's Edge and the Disney theme parks and the cruise lines have to offer. Can help you plan every detail and always share invaluable tips. That's for Walt Disney World, Disneyland, the Disney Cruise Lines, or other cruise lines. It doesn't have to be Disney related. They literally can help you plan a vacation anywhere on the planet. Be sure to go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel and sign up for a free no obligation quote to any of the Disney theme parks on the planet, or any vacation that you have in mind. You'll have the best vacation possible and help out me and Coffee with Kenobi in the process.
We are back, and the elevator sequence where they're sitting on top of this massive, basically like a cargo bay, but it's an elevator as it lowers down. It really harkens back to classic adventure movies. I think it was very, very cool. Kind of remind me of old Sean Connery, James Bond stuff. Eventually they get to a terminal, and we find out there are 50 clone commandos. So it was great to see the Republic commandos from the video games
Always.
to canon right there. Like that was great. But then we find out there are 1,000 TK troopers. So this lets out quite a yell from the Zare household when it happened, because we know that means there are stormtroopers. Now, these stormtroopers are quite a bit different because these are the stormtroopers that were the original look based on Ralph McQuarrie's designs. Tom, I think one of the great things Star Wars does well, or when it does it well, it hits it out of the park, and that is capitalizing on nostalgia to advance the story further. And it's kind of paradoxical, but I think it really works well here.
Absolutely. I mean, it helps with the evolution. I mean, McQuarrie's artwork was a pre look at this, what might be. And so, sure, why not use it to show the growth and the evolution of, in this case, stormtrooper armor from clone. It's always, at least in my mind, I've always wondered, how did they get from those taller bucket heads to the flatter ones with the I don't know, what looks like a muffler going around their neck, or the bottom of the helmet. And so it just makes a natural transition, which I think is super cool. And you're right, nostalgia. I mean, what Star Wars fan doesn't know Ralph McQuarrie and hasn't seen either through a book or a trading card or something, all of those initial original art, what's the word I'm looking for? Prototypes?
Just concept.
Why can't I think?
Yeah, concept art. I mean,
concept art. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah. So but it helps to show that. But it also gives us as the fans a little tip of the hat to, hey, we know our history, and we know where we've come from. Even 44, 45 years ago, and so we're going to take advantage of that. And I think it's magnificent. And yeah, I would 100% agree, because of course it's my favorite character who makes the realization that these are not clone troopers, these are TK units. And so I had the same, no one in my house made the recognition except me. And so I just had to do an internal, yes, here we are. We have the first stormtroopers, in this instant. But I really think it's cool and interesting that Tech, who's the person who has all the resources, he knows how to cut in. He always has the answer to things, and the dictionary answer. The denotative definitions of everything. And here he's confounded because the Empire has changed codes on them. He even sets off an alarm. Yes. And Gregor is great. He, after they pick him up, he's like, "You can't use clone. They're not using clone technology. You gotta change the way." And it's like almost makes Tech feel obsolete in this case. But I love the fact that he's like, I don't know what this means. It's like confounding to Tech, and I just love that Tech is finally confused about something.
Right. It's rare. And like you said, he does feel somewhat obsolete or uncertain about his role because everything seems so logical and practical to him. He has certainly shown moments of compassion and empathy. He's not cold-hearted and logical like Spock was early on in Spock's career. Yes, we did make a Star Trek reference. I'm very comfortable with that.
Indeed.
But they also, I think it's cool to see him uncertain. We do get to see Gregor. We finally get the reveal of Gregor. So, Carter, I'd like to hear your reactions to Gregor, as well as finally canonically seeing, at least, we've heard about it through different elements of the canon, about how the clone troopers eventually get phased out and then they turn to recruiting and get a lot of stormtroopers. In fact, we actually hear they come from all over the galaxy. They aren't as skilled, but there is an endless supply of them. There's a lot to talk about, Carter, but where do you want to go first?
I'm going to start with probably what I know best, which would be how the clone troopers got phased out, stormtroopers got phased in, or TK troopers got phased in. I played a lot of the old Star Wars video games, and some of the newer ones, but like Battlefront 2 from 2005, it's one of my favorite games. And for those of our listeners that don't know, you can play a campaign mode where you follow I believe an unnamed soldier in the 501st Legion. And they go from Clone Wars, and you get to see Order 66, and then they get phased out. And one of the most important battles of them phasing out the clones is Kamino's resistance. And while that's something that I hope that we end up seeing, I understand if they won't show it this season, but I believe that we started to ramp there towards the end of the season. That campaign also did touch on the 501st having to train and fight alongside new recruits.
And this is all
very
part of
interesting.
the Legends line, which, as we know, and we've seen time and again, they are happy to borrow from to help
Yes.
enhance the canonical story.
And I think that it's very important to show that the clones are training their replacements. And to me, it seems like Gregor might be the only one that has realized this, because I'm not sure how the other clones would be content with this. But I guess the inhibitor chip, maybe, he went through a pretty big explosion back in the Clone Wars. That might have messed up his chip. Who knows? It's shown to take damage and explosions.
It does. And if I can interject really quickly, doesn't it show the great hubris of Palpatine? He had soldiers he could completely control because of an inhibitor chip, and then he wants to get rid of them because he has these recruits that they all think he thinks they're just going to all slurp the Imperial Kool-Aid, and it obviously works for 19 plus years.
Yeah.
But how arrogant is that to think you can just control people without just by propaganda? I mean, I guess we've seen plenty of examples of it through real life history itself. Well, let's switch a little bit and talk about Gregor. What are your impressions of Gregor, and what do you remember about him from the Clone Wars?
Is that for me?
Yeah.
That is a little bit more fuzzy. I do remember some of the Clone Commando arc that we got. Can't remember what season it was, but I do remember that being.
It was the third and fourth parts of the Sunny Day in the Void. I believe that was season 4.
I do remember being very impressed. And let me say about the Commandos, I'm very happy that we got to see a DC-17M in action. Those things are quite fancy machines.
Yes.
I do
a lot
believe
of
that
firepower.
Maybe Tom. Oh, they're insane. Those things can put out some serious power. We saw the Commando fire off, I don't know how many shots after getting shoved back into his own men before they could get that door shut. But I do think that Tom would be better experienced in the speaking about Gregor in the Clone Wars, as I'm not super familiar with that arc.
Sure. Tom, what did you remember about Gregor? He was always one of my favorites because of how he was revealed in the Clone Wars as someone who had amnesia. He had a beard. He was just basically working custodial, and eventually he gets his memory back thanks to R2-D2 and Colonel Meeber Gascon, voiced by the amazing Stephen Stanton. That there's basically more of him. And when they left him, he was basically surrounded on this platform by all kinds of battle droids. And then we didn't know what happened to him until we saw Rebels Season 2, when he was an older clone with Rex and Wolf. But I, for one, was very, very happy to see him back. You can tell he's got some PTSD or some things going on, because while he's there as an instructor for the TKs, he's still got that eerie laugh to break tension, also kind of create tension at the same time.
You know what?
A little scary.
You gave everything I would have known about Gregor. I actually have to say I remember Gregor better from Rebels than I do Clone Wars. But what I was going to say that I did remember about him was how he was surrounded by those battle droids, and then we knew nothing else after that. That's about all I remembered from him. But yes, the laughter, his sort of it's got sort of a hint of like a maniacal feel to it. Like just kind of crazy, but his language that he uses is always very loyal to the cause.
Yes.
And one of my favorite lines from him, let me see if I can find it here real quick. One of my favorite lines was he says, "Oh, you're the defectives. To me, the ones that want to stay here are defective."
Yes, I wrote that down too.
I love that line. But yeah, the fact that he was used as an Imperial instructor and that he saw through that and was like, I know how to get out of here. How do you know? Well, I've done it once. Well, you got caught. That was outside. I made it outside. His reasoning just brought some lightheartedness to what's turning out to be a quite dire and heavy episode.
Absolutely. There also, by the way, and the undercurrent through the middle of this episode is some musical cues from the Death Star in A New Hope when Luke, Han, and Leia are inside the Death Star and they're sneaking around. That music is all in the middle of this episode, and I thought it was such a great way to echo that sentiment you mentioned earlier. You could very well be on the Death Star with the interior, the way it's lit, the way it's designed, the way the walls look. But the music adds so much to the tone. I thought that was marvelous. They're going to escape through the vents, try to get out. In the meantime, they've got to get out of there. So that they run out. Feel free to sort of talk about the escape itself, Carter, and them trying to get out here, the problems with the elevator, all that good stuff.
So this actually reminded me a lot of A New Hope, which a lot of commentators that I follow across different social medias have all made the same kind of note that a lot of this music seems very similar, if not exactly what was played throughout the Death Star approach, the when they're discovering what is going on in the Death Star, Obi-Wan's adventures in the original Death Star. So it kind of gives off a similar feeling. And this exit scene and the chase scene really tie into that. You have the little bit of break where they get away, and then almost as if Han is turning the corner into a platoon of stormtroopers, the door opens and it is a platoon of TK troopers spearheaded by one commando who lets off an ungodly amount of shots before they can close that door, which again leads to some more humor from Gregor after almost getting torn to pieces by DC-17M. But when they finally, they can kind of see the outside, they're almost there. A commando rounds the corner, and people have made connections to the Republic Commandos game. I'm not going to make that connection because I know a lot of people in this community don't like to theorize, don't like to be hypothetical with Star Wars, and I get that. But that clone commando took 3 or 4 shots from a stun gun after putting a couple in Gregor. And I found it very interesting that not only did they not fire regular shots at the commandos, they didn't fire shots at the TK troopers, even after learning that they weren't clones.
Right.
This reminded me a lot of the Martez sisters from I'm trying to remember what episode
Trace and Rafa.
that would have been.
Martez, yeah. Yep.
From it was one of the earliest episodes when they're going after that
the middle
that droid
four.
head.
Yep.
It reminded me like there's some care of life in the Bad Batch, because these are volunteers who are actively trying to take them down. They aren't even their brothers, and they're still stunning them. In fact, I believe the only Imperial that was that lost their life not to Wrecker and his shots from the Marauder was the clone commando who was shot by his own men in the exhaust port.
Right.
And then when they finally reach the exhaust port, obviously we see the clone commando come out, and he actually puts up quite a fight against a couple of these guys, which I thought was very cool to see, because these commandos, I think, like, we've seen it in a couple episodes of the Clone Wars. Outside of that, there's nothing canon. These guys really showed out, and I think that it is like by the hair on the top of their head that the Bad Batch got away this episode.
It was very thrilling.
Oh yeah,
sure.
and then go ahead.
No, go ahead.
And then we see Omega. She actually was showing off some of her pilot skills, probably taking some advice from Hera, until Echo can take over, and it becomes clear that he is a more experienced flyer. But it was still very, very cool to see Omega put in some of that work that she's obviously been practicing in the downtime.
Oh yeah. In fact, she's so experienced that by this point that she could probably give Hera some pointers, and then of course maybe who knows, maybe we'll learn that Hera's such a good pilot because of some of Omega's example. Wouldn't that be cool to see?
That would be a cool double crossover.
That would be excellent. Yeah, there's the escape is great. The suspense is very, very real. I remember saying repeatedly to Mason when I watched this, I'm actually nervous about how they're going to escape, or are they going to escape? Omega has this great idea, because there's a marvelous chase sequence that reminds me of the end of The Empire Strikes Back, where it's kind of more personal and intimate. There are just a couple of vehicles in question. They, Echo or Tech has to leave, then he has to fly back to try to get the rest of the crew. They have to use Gonky. Even I'm saying the name, but that's his name. To get power to get the systems booted up. It's a spectacular sequence. Carter covered it beautifully, Tom. Is there anything that you want to bring up and how they get out of the base itself before the big moment when Hunter misses the jump?
Yeah, there are a few things that I want to mention. First of all, we talked about Omega's flying skills. I just want to point out that Tech mentioned she's sufficient. She is sufficient, which coming from Tech is high praise. He says, that is sufficient. I'll take over from here, which is high praise coming from him. So her flying skills are pretty exceptional at that point, as far as I can tell from Tech's point of view. Another thing I wanted to mention was, I don't know if you noticed, but when Wrecker is firing from the rear gun, there is a moment that is a total flashback to Han in the Millennium Falcon sitting in the gunners, and Han reaches up and makes adjustment on that little box thing. Can you picture that in the scenes where he's swinging around in that 1940s pilot, and he reaches up and Wrecker does that. Wrecker makes an adjustment on that, just like Han Solo does on the Falcon's gunners. So I was like, oh, that is so cool. We've so much New Hope vibe in this one. What's that?
There's so much New Hope goodness.
Yeah, right. And I'm trying to think. I had a couple other things written down here. Actually, nope. It goes past where you want to talk about. But I wanted to just reemphasize that this was a thrilling, maybe a high point thrill-wise, because there's been lots of times we've talked about in previous episodes about the Bad Batch where we felt that there was some definite peril, but they always find a way out. That when we're in this sequence, I kept thinking, how can they possibly get back? Or why don't they just get back? Put the shields up, go back, drop the thing, and have everybody jump on. But they just couldn't seem to make it happen. And it was really very tense. And then what happens.
Yes, it does. I want to throw back really quickly. There's so many good points by both of you. I love this. I wanted to go back really quickly. You mentioned the stun setting on their blasters, Carter. And I love that too, because one thing that the Bad Batch does that Star Wars hasn't always been able to lay claim to is that it eradicates the myth of redemptive violence. Even when these are not clones, the TKs are not clones, they're clearly trying to kill them. They still stun. And it's even more surprising because they're soldiers, right? The soldiers are used to battle. They're used to the cost. They're used to the risk. But they've pretty much been fighting droids the majority of their professional lives. So the fact that they're still doing it like this, I would love to. In fact, the next time I talk to the directors, if I get a chance to do so again, I'm going to ask them about that decision because I don't think it's an accident. I think it's really, really cool. Hunter, in this amazing sequence that we've all talked about how much we really liked, again, so reminiscent of The Empire Strikes Back and other sequences in Star Wars. Hunter jumps. It looks like they're really in trouble. He jumps and he misses this ladder. He has this mighty, mighty fall that you almost worry if he's even going to survive it at all. And I think, Tom, perhaps most impressively of all, is that Tech is tempted to go back, even with the huge odds against him, completely going against the numbers and completely tapping into the empathy and the respect and admiration he has for Hunter.
Yes.
I really, really thought that was important.
That all came through. Yes, it's like the commander is down and Tech even though it doesn't make logical sense to put yourself back into the fire, it's part of who he is. And it's part of being a member of Clone Force 99. You go back for the leader and you don't let him go. And like he's fidgeting with it and he says, no, we're coming back.
Yes.
And how many of, who couldn't sit there with the goosebumps on their arms when Hunter says, that's an order? How many characters have we heard? I mean, I'm pretty sure we've heard Rex say it. I'm pretty sure Commander Cody, many people in Star Wars saga has said that's an order. But this is one that has a different feel to it, because we know this is a tight-knit group. They've lost one, and all that. But when he says that's an order, you see the hesitation, and then you see Tech reach for the center of the console, and you know exactly what that means. We don't have to see him pull back on it, but we do get the pullback shot of the dogfight, and then the Marauder disappears. And oh my gosh! And I mean, I guess, and right before that, you also hear that just horrifyingly child voice saying, "No, change, go back for," and she's like appealing. She shakes Wrecker, and she's screaming in the Marauder before they take off. And just, oh my gosh, so many emotions and so many feelings in that like 20-second sequence.
It's absolutely chilling. It's got what it does really well. This first season has done so well is create a level of cost and suspense and tension, because again, this has that wonderful thing to it that Rebels had. We don't know what's going to happen to these characters because we haven't already seen the end game on the big screen. So we don't know what's going to happen to them. Which is thrilling. There are two major sequences left that I want to talk about as we wrap up the show. One is the line, a chief medical scientist I have use for. A politician, I do not. So we've got that, and we've got Hunter and Crosshair reunited. I'll let you guys play rock, paper, scissors, or arm wrestle, decide who's going to talk about what.
Carter, you go first and choose whichever one you want to do.
I am going to choose the scene on Kamino, which the Hunter and Crosshair scene may be on Kamino, but the one that's definitely on Kamino.
Yes.
Now, what I noticed earlier from the first shot of Kamino is that through all of Kamino, what we have always seen are these bright white, sterile environments, like a hospital. When we first saw Kamino this episode, in that what I assume was a loading bay, or some kind of hangar on one of those floating cities, it was dark. It seemed scruffy. And I think that was the first sign that this is going to be an episode that shapes the future of Kamino. Because we've known Kamino as this bright white, almost perfect world up to this point. It seems like their clones are like the best soldiers that have ever touched the planet. These people were able to solve their own extinction. And then at the end of this episode, it all comes crumbling down. We see General Rampart. He discovers that they are trying to get their top scientists, their top cloning minds off the planet. He's not happy. And he didn't even have to say he wasn't happy for you to be able to understand that he was in a bad mood when he walked in. And I do believe that everybody else in the room, probably including the clones with him, knew that. And then what I think is important is that the Prime Minister, and I'm totally blanking on names here, the Prime Minister,
Lama Su, I believe.
Lama Su, kept a straight face. Like, that's someone I don't want to play in poker. Kept a straight face the whole time. The whole time. But Rampart saw through it. And I think this ties back into what is great about these Disney Plus shows so far. They're showing the dirtiness of the Empire. I mean, whether it was an Imperial remnant officer joking about Operation Cinder. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
And we see how that affected a bounty hunter who had such a prestigious name. Even he couldn't handle that. We see General Rampart in such cold blood. What we assume ordering the execution, or at least the exile, of the Prime Minister of the planet that supplied them with the army that they are now using to tear it all down. And I think as we come into, as Tom referred to with chess, the end game, I believe not only has the Empire put the Bad Batch in check, I believe that the Empire just put Camino into checkmate. They took out their top official. They have the planet completely under its control. And I think that this really spells the downfall. If it wasn't already, if it hadn't already been laid out in front of us, the end of Camino and the end of the clone program as we know it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very, very cool.
Well said. And Dan, you set it up. What the Bad Batch has done well is show, the cost of teammates, the cost of relationships, the cost of a family relationship, and in what's who is causing? I mean, it's the Empire. I mean, what more causes the cost of everything, of all of the stress of this, other than the Empire? And the one thing I'm going to add to the Camino, because Carter, that was great. I mean, what more is there to say? Except I just wanted to make one comment about Rampart, since we've already talked about how nasty he is when he says that line that you said, Dan. Scientist he has a use for, politician he does not. Your services are no longer needed. And what said everything that needed to be said in that whole moment was when he turned around and he gives the nod to the trooper standing there, who steps in as everybody else steps out. Say no more. Say no more.
Phenomenal camera work.
Yeah,
Yes.
we know what's gonna happen there. So I that leaves Hunter in the cell for me, and wow, Carter, you said maybe you put the potential in my head where, oh, did they take Hunter back to Camino? I don't know that I saw anything that gave me any indication of that. I thought the cell looked a lot like the one that Gregor was in, but who knows? I mean, they've been trying to get Bad Batch to come back to capture Omega, so maybe. But when the trooper walks up and we realize that's Hunter in the cell, and the trooper walks up and you see the armor, you know who it is, and he takes off his helmet and he says something along the lines, I didn't write this one down, but he says something along the lines, I was hoping for the whole squad, but you'll do.
You'll do. I think that's it. Yeah.
What?
You know what?
Like what does he mean by that?
Yeah.
Are they going to do something to him? You know what I'm saying?
It's make it clear that they were very important to the future of the cloning operation, but that's gone now.
That's right.
Those
contracts are done.
That time passed.
Yeah. So it's kind of like he had purpose in capturing the whole group. I don't think even Omega might be in part of his thing, but I think he's really wanting to get his quote unquote buddies.
He wants his boys back.
To do something, but he says you'll do, as if he's going to make him do something. I don't know. Maybe I'm interpreting that line way too far, but I just felt like it's not like, oh, good, I've captured you. Well, you're in. What's next? I think he's got purpose for capturing Hunter. And of course, it's not going to be for anything good. It's not like he's capturing him to say, yeah, can you get this thing out of my head? No, it's I'm capturing you and you're going to do something for me. And it's just, I don't know. I left with a horrible feeling, but that's where I got the idea of check. I've got the king in danger. And so where do we go from here? It's such a horrible feeling. And then as we fade to black, you get that crosshair. Wow, do we call it a theme? Whatever it is, musical sound, where it's that thing. Oh man,
I noticed that. That was I don't think that they would have left it on such a weird note if it wasn't intentional. Disney and Lucasfilm, they don't just leave this stuff in here. That was meant to signify something.
something.
Definitely.
I guess we will have to wait and see till Friday.
We'll
Stay
find out
tuned.
very, very soon. Yes, we're
the
not that
hard
far
part.
away from the penultimate episode of season 1 of the Bad Batch. I really, really liked hearing both of you break it down, and I've got to say, this may be a bit random, but at the end, I wasn't worried about Hunter. Crosshair showed up; it was ominous, but I'm not worried about him. I don't know why. I just Hunter can take care of himself. Crosshair has shown vulnerability in spite of himself over the past couple episodes. So I'm not sure what that means, but I'm really looking forward to finding that out.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are. With Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is... yes.
As we near the end of the show today, I want to thank each and every one of you for taking time out of your busy schedule to have a cup of coffee with me and for helping to spread the word about our Star Wars family we've got here at Coffee with Kenobi. Be sure to tune in Monday nights at 8 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on Facebook Live at www.coffeewithkenobi.com/live or www.facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi and have a cup of coffee, tea, or any beverage of your choosing with me as we continue the conversation. To join us in the CWK Cafe, which is our Facebook group, and share your Star Wars thoughts, comments, reviews, and opinions in a family-friendly, spoiler-free place that is also drama-free, go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/community and be part of the conversation, talk about this week's show, or just talk about some Star Wars. We have a lot of fun and you'll make some new friends as well as catch up with longtime friends along the way. I also want to thank all of the new and longtime members of the CWK Alliance and let you know how much I appreciate your help and encouragement. If you want to join the CWK Alliance, go to www.cwkalliance.com and sign up today. Not only will you help out Coffee with Kenobi, but you also get access to CWK Pour-Over, the exclusive weekly podcast not heard anywhere else. It's a great way to support and help out the show, and 10% of your monthly contributions go directly to the St. Jude Children's Hospital to support the incredibly important work they are doing to help these brave children and their families. Plus, contributors at the CWK All-Star level can watch a video podcast of CWK Pour-Over hosted by me, Tom Gross, and Corey Clubb. Feel free to reach out anytime if you have any questions. In addition to being part of the community on Facebook, please don't forget to visit our website at www.coffeewithkenobi.com for Star Wars news, announcements, reviews, videos, and so much more. If you have a question for me or just want to share your thoughts on the air, feel free to email me at danz@coffeewithkenobi.com and I'll share them on the show. You can also connect with me on Twitter at Mr. Zaire, MRZEHR, or on Instagram at DanZareCWK. There are also a lot more ways to connect with me and Coffee with Kenobi on social media. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Give us a like on Facebook at facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi. Check us out on Pinterest or subscribe to our Coffee with Kenobi YouTube channel. On our YouTube channel, you can find Facebook Live video, different interviews throughout the years, highlights of video coverage throughout the Coffee with Kenobi history, and the audio podcast itself. You can order my book, The Star Wars Book, which I co-wrote with Lucasfilm's Pablo Hidalgo and Cole Horton, on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Books A Million, Walmart, or anywhere books are sold. You can also find my writing on Coffee with Kenobi's website, as well as StarWars.com, where I am an official blogger there, and on IGN, where I contribute occasionally to articles about Star Wars, as well as other popular culture topics. If you are considering starting a podcast or a blog, let me know how I can help you get started and make your creative vision a reality. Be sure to check out danzmedia.com and we can get the process started. I am also available to come to your school, conference, business, or organization to talk about how to tap into your strengths and help you bring out your very best. I want to inspire you to be inspired so you can take that first step into a larger world. Thanks as always to our Coffee with Kenobi sponsors, especially MEI and Mouse Fan Travel, our travel partner and your one-stop shop for all things Walt Disney World, Disneyland, the Disney Cruise Lines, or anywhere on the planet you want to go on your vacation. Please go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel to book your magical vacation and help support Coffee with Kenobi in the process. If you like the show, please tweet out that you're listening, share it on Facebook, or invite your friends and family to tune in and share a cup of coffee with us. And if the Force is especially with you, please take a couple of minutes to rate and review the show on iTunes or Google Podcasts. Every review makes a huge difference and helps to spread the word, and I can't thank you enough for your help, for your support, and your friendship. I love so much being a part of this wonderful Star Wars community, and I can't thank you enough for all that you do for me and Coffee with Kenobi.
All right, so this was great. As we're wrapping things up, Tom, you said originally that I think you said an A-. You want to keep that A-? Because you sure made a lot of A+ comments, my friend, as I'm checking your rubric.
Oh. No. What I said was it's a solid A for me.
Well, that's true.
The minus came when I started writing plus, and I changed my mind. I didn't want to do plus, but I'd only written one part of the plus, and it was the minus part. And I was like, no. So I erased it. So no, it is definitely for me a solid A. This is probably the wrong strategy of grading, which, but I'm anticipating A++++ ahead.
Okay,
I think
fair enough.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
Any last minute thoughts on this one, Tom, or is that about do it?
The only thing I wanted to say was, and this is just building off of what you just said about Hunter, and you're not concerned for him, is I am concerned for him. But one thing I really appreciated about him is, and maybe it builds on and makes me feel maybe not so. Maybe you've calmed me a little bit about my concern for him, because when he fell and he says to Omega, he says, "Sorry, kid." He takes the knife that's in his hand. He was ready to fight, but clearly the odds are not in his favor. He takes the knife, shoves it back in the scabbard on his arm, and he surrenders honorably.
Man.
I think that says a lot about him. And so maybe we shouldn't be concerned. Thanks for saying that, because I feel very much more at ease about the way this.
Hey, I'm here to help. David Motter said I'm a psychiatrist, right? Or psychologist.
That's right.
So I'm here to help. Carter, any last minute thoughts on this episode?
I'm easily keeping my grade at an A+. If there's something higher, I don't know I'd put it there, because as Tom said, I do anticipate some of the best content we've gotten on the Star Wars side of the Disney Plus shows so far.
Oh wow, that's great.
And how do I say this? It's a little cliche, but The Mandalorian was something that I latched onto very heavily. And actually, after watching this episode, I went and rewatched the last 2 episodes of season 2 of The Mandalorian. And this is the first episode that's like hit in the same way that The Mandalorian did.
Wow.
It's got the action, it's got the storytelling, it's got the pulling legend stuff or expanded universe into canon, and then it's got the huge cliffhanger at the end. There are so many ways that they could go with this story. Will there be a season 2? I don't know. I sure hope so at this point. I really do. This has been a great 14 episodes. But this by far has been my favorite episode. And I'm hoping it only goes up for the remaining 2.
It's been nice. Of all the Disney Plus series that we've been watching, both Marvel and in Star Wars, this has been the longest one as far as the most episodes in one season. So it's been really, really welcoming. I've certainly enjoyed the conversation. I love this episode. I love the tension. I love the drama. I love that it's got a beginning, a middle, and an end, but it also sets up a nice head scratcher where you're really worried about the main character and excited about what's going to happen. It's very, very exciting to be able to chat with the both of you. And of course, we got to let everybody know they can continue the conversation with you or reach out and just say hello. And Tom, let's start with you.
Of course, I am on Twitter at Draftline, DRAFTLINE. And you can also catch my writings on Blogger. The blog is titled Seeking Positivity in the Galaxy.
And Carter, where can people reach out to you if they want to continue the conversation?
I'm on Twitter at Carter Grieco 2. You'll find a lot of sports stuff on there, a lot of bull stuff. But I am very big into Star Wars. Not so much on there, but if you have any questions, I would love to answer them. Or if you want to continue the conversation, I'm very open to that as well.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
There's no one here.